to ensure that we are not only learning from these events, but also taking decisive actions to improve our wildfire management and response capabilities. This decisive action began this season, where we brought crews, aircraft, and equipment on earlier, made significant new investments in fire smart programming, and added more aircraft to our fleet. The release of this review today underscores our dedication to transparency, accountability, and continuous improvement. It is vital that the public trusts our government's ability to manage wildfires effectively, and we want to assure you that we are taking the recommendations of this after-action review seriously. We are committed to implementing the necessary changes to strengthen our wildfire operations, with some of the recommendations already being implemented in 2024. The review highlights several key areas where we can enhance our strategies and operations. These include investments in state-of-the-art wildfire behavior modeling, expanding our human resource capacity, and improving our coordination with Indigenous and community governments, property owners, and stakeholders. Our response to each recommendation reflects our dedication to ensuring that our wildfire strategy is rooted in solid research, science, traditional knowledge, and best practices. Moreover, we acknowledge that preventing and fighting wildfires is not the responsibility of one entity alone. It is a shared responsibility that involves every resident, community, and government in the territory. We are committed to fostering a collaborative approach to help ensure that all parties are well prepared and well coordinated in the face of these natural challenges. We understand the challenges posted by the 2023 wildfires. We can better prepare for future seasons. Our goal is to build a more resilient, informed, and prepared territory where every resident has confidence in our ability to protect them and their communities. Today, as we move forward with the findings and recommendations from this review, I want to reaffirm our government's commitment to being open, transparent, and responsive. We will continue to engage with communities, stakeholders, and partners as we implement these improvements. I would like to thank all those involved in this review process for their hard work and dedication. We recognize the significant impact these fires had on our residents, communities, and our shared environment. And I know that talking about the 2023 wildfire season can be triggering. Together, we are working towards a safer and more resilient Northwest Territories. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We'll now move on to the question period. And as I mentioned, each news outlet will have the opportunity to ask one question and one follow-up. And I will start with NWT Media. Please try to direct your question to one of our panelists. The order for Northern Media is as follows. We have Ollie Williams with Cabin Radio, Luke Carroll with CBC, Tom Taylor with NNSL, James O'Connor with CKLB, and Sarah Zinos with Radio-Canada. If I missed anyone, please let me know in the chat and I will get to you when we run through the list. And we'll start with Ollie.
Thank you very much, Nicole, for the opportunity. This question is for the Minister. There are 11 key areas identified here. There are more than 24 recommendations just for the near term and then 17 more for the longer term. Which of the areas concerns you the most, and where is the GNWT prioritizing the actions it now takes to address some of these shortcomings?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. From my experience in the past, and I actually worked for the department in the fire program, and I think that the report surely identifies many areas that are of concern, and I think ensuring that we have adequate resources is certainly one of the big priorities for me, and that's a process that I'm currently working on looking at the recommendations from this report and how I can work with my cabinet colleagues to ensure that we have the adequate resources to support the folks on the ground.
Do you have a follow-up, Ollie?
Yeah, I do. Minister, assuming that when we talk about adequate resources, we might be talking about things like the baseline capacity, the number of firefighters. The report suggests bring on at least 2 more unit crews. That's some 40 people or so each year, just to be sure that you have enough resource. That means finding people. It means finding money. When do you expect to take that sort of action? How will the GNWT pursue making sure it has enough firefighters?
Thank you again for the question. So from a financial perspective, this is a conversation that will happen at the cabinet table. And as we're going into the next budget cycle, that will happen here in the not too distant future. I'll pass the second part of that question around the resources over to Director Gravel. He can provide some more direct information on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Oli. And can you repeat that part of the question again, just so I'm clear?
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. I was asking the minister about how the GNWT will pursue finding the extra people and the extra money to bring on, some 30, 40, 50, however many it may be, extra firefighters. What steps is the GNWT taking to make sure that you have enough people to do the job as far as this review sees it?
I appreciate that. Yeah, so there's multiple steps involved here. The minister obviously indicated that there's a budget planning process that we'll have to go through internally within our own operations. We have, for example, 5 regional managers that manage fire operations at the regional level, and our own headquarters headquarters manager staff. So we'll be meeting here in the coming weeks to again go through this report and in more detail and identify how we're going to execute the recommendations. And we also have partnerships with the federal government where they're supporting us financially for procuring equipment and expanding our resources. So these are all tools that we're going to be utilizing, and if needed, try to access more funding to execute the recommendations.
Thank you. We'll move on to Luke Carroll with CBC.
Thank you. So my question for Minister MacDonald, the majority of MLAs voted in favor of a public inquiry previously. So do you feel this review will satisfy them, or do you think there's still need for a public inquiry?
Thank you for the question. So the MNP review is operational in nature. So it really looks at the operations of ECC and the directly related to the fire suppression activities. Currently, there is an additional after action review that's been initiated through EIA and it was awarded to Transitional Solutions Incorporated, and it is looking at the overall GNWT response to the fire, to the whole activity itself. So as far as the reference to, oh, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. The reference to the inquiry, I think that the after action review process is a really good way to look at how things went and what areas can be improved. Thank you.
And a follow-up, Luke?
Yes. So if there's no answer for this, there wasn't in the technical briefing, I do have another question I'd like to ask, but one issue with the public inquiry that was highlighted was the cost. And I'm just wondering if you have the amount that this review cost. I guess that question's to the minister because nobody had the answer in the technical briefing.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. Yeah, so the budget for this for the NMP after action review was $300,000 was the initial budget. We have not received the final invoices on the project itself, so I can't at this time determine what the exact final cost will be, but it will be reported through our regular process once it is finalized.
We'll move over to James O'Connor with CKLB. James, do you have a question? Okay, we will move on to Sarah Zanos. Okay, she doesn't have a mic. Her question is, in the report, it says that misinformation was an issue, especially on social media. Do you have an example of the kind of impact it did have on people's security? Mike Westwick, I'm going to throw this one to you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Sarah. I would say that a way that it might have affected people's security was basically through the spread of unsubstantiated rumors. We saw rumors, for example, that threats did exist to certain communities that did not, in fact, exist, and where fire might have been located. We also saw, I would add, unsubstantiated misinformation around things related to fire response, which I'd say at times did impact negatively people's trust in the government and people's people within the organization's morale at times, I would say. Some of those included things like suggesting that Fire SS052 was left unmanaged at its start. That's categorically incorrect. It's something that we were fighting against all season. Another piece of misinformation that really spread across the country, we were not immune to it, were conspiracy theories, I would call them, regarding governments, playing a role in starting these fires. That was a line of misinformation that spread far and wide, and indeed was, internationally noticed and internationally disseminated. So all of those things were challenging. I would say that they're also not to be unexpected in scenarios like this. When people are faced with something as difficult to comprehend as the season was last year, people begin looking for answers for those kinds of things. And sometimes they're looking for answers in the wrong places. And it's a trauma response. And it's something that our public information program works to address by being prompt, accurate, and fast with the way that we push out information, and frequent as well, to really fill those gaps. So the role of social media is important in the spread of that stuff, but it's important for folks to remember that there is a benefit to social media as well, and that is that we get to participate in those conversations, which likely would have been happening around the dinner table otherwise. So we're going to be utilizing every tool in our toolkit to make sure that Northerners get actionable, accurate, and timely information about wildfires and other emergencies. That's a big focus of what we do.
Thanks, Mike. If you want to stay on Sarah's follow-up question, she's wondering what has already been put in place regarding misinformation and how to deal with it in the future when it does come to a catastrophic event like a fire.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that sort of speaks to the last bit of my answer there to a degree. The things that people are looking for in a crisis and in a situation where they're facing trauma is accurate, actionable, and fast-paced information. And we have a process in place where we have rostered information officers who work hard to follow all those fires every day, put out frequent updates, and indeed we do assign folks to fires, particularly ones that may cause threats to people or communities, so that information is available in as real time as possible. We're going to be continuing to work to bolster that function. It'll only become more important as information continues to move more quickly. And I would like to also note the important role that all the folks on this call play in that work. Journalists play a critical role in all emergencies. And we certainly appreciate the tireless work that folks on this call put in last season, working to get accurate information out to Northerners and, in fact, play a big role in quashing that misinformation as it happened.
Thank you, Mike. We're going to go to Cristiano with GTNO.
Merci beaucoup. I have a question. I believe it's for Minister McDonald. So the review noted some communication issues between the ministry and municipal and indigenous governments. It looks like there was a concern in the review. My question is, how does your ministry plan to enhance coordination with the municipal and indigenous governments to ensure a more effective response during the wildfires next season?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yeah, this certainly was a concern from last year, with 70+% of the territory evacuated. We did certainly run into some challenges in communicating with Indigenous and local governments. This was certainly one of the high priorities that we addressed as a department through the off season, and have implemented new processes and strategies to ensure that we are have timely communication on a very regular basis with all of our partners in the Indigenous governments as well as communities. And I think to date this year that has worked very well, and we've had really good responses back that we are providing accurate and timely information in the events that have occurred this season. Thank you.
And Mike is just going to add to that response.
Yeah, and as far as specific actions, we did implement a new approach to community notification of wildfire events. This was done in partnership with emergency managers at Municipal and Community Affairs. I would just also say that a really important part of our program, and one that's really close to my heart, is making sure that we're engaging with communities in the off season, so that we're talking about this stuff before these events actually happen. And to that end, we are committing, of course, to extensive community engagement throughout the off season, as we do every year, and continuously improve that process. This new notification protocol work, which it isn't necessarily the most exciting sounding stuff. It's basically who calls who, when, and how do we characterize certain levels of threat. But it's important work, and that really did arise as a major issue throughout those community engagement sessions in the off season. So, working to build, and in some cases, repair certain aspects of relationships with communities is a focus for us throughout the off season for sure.
Cristiano, do you have a follow-up?
No, I don't. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open it up to all media on the line now. I believe we have Bob Weber with Canadian Press. Bob, do you have a question?
I do. Minister, 2023 was pretty bad for wildfires across the country. You folks are the first ones that I'm aware of who have produced a report into how things went and what could be improved. What lessons do you think your work offers to other jurisdictions in Canada?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I think from a national perspective, certainly, it was identified within the report that capacity is the challenge. Certainly for us, as being a very small territory, we have a very limited amount of resources, and we have a vast landscape. So I think, that was identified as a challenge here, but nationally, certainly, the resources available across the country in the light of, the changing climate and the more frequency and intensity of the wildfires from coast to coast to coast really was brought forward. And I think that is the biggest message that the country needs to hear as a whole.
And as a follow-up, sir, you mentioned climate change. I'm wondering, to what extent do you think what we saw in 2023 represents the new standard that we have to measure our response capability against?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think certainly, you know, over the last couple of years, the Northwest Territories and most of Western Canada has been in a prolonged drought, you know, which has really put us in a situation where, you know, the potential for catastrophic fire exists on many fronts in many jurisdictions. And I think that, you know, as the climate and the planet warms, you know, this is likely to, you know, have these events happen more frequently than we may have seen decades ago.
Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Tom Taylor with NNSL if you have a question. Okay, I don't hear anything, so we'll start off with Ollie again. Ollie, do you have another question?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. I do. A question for the minister. Just looking at the themes of this review, one that we keep coming back to is a sense of an overarching lack of situational awareness. That's the phrase used in the report at key moments. For example, with the Hay River Enterprise fire, the report says there was a noticeable gap in the reporting of that wildfire situation between August the 2nd and 11th. And then regarding the Yellowknife wildfire, the Yellowknife Betchikol wildfire, the report describes what it calls a significant underestimation regarding the situation and potential wildfire behavior. How can you talk us through what the GNWT has done to make sure that that lack of situational awareness isn't an issue this year?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. And I'll speak to it briefly, then I'll pass it over to Director Gravel because it is more of an operational based question. But I think as we look at, you know, our technology and the systems that we employ in this work, weather detection, you know, our satellite imagery, these types of systems are only as valuable as the information that's provided, right? That the information that comes out of them. So I think some of the challenges with the technology certainly could have contributed to this situation, but I think Director Gravel could add to this for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Yeah, I guess first I want to highlight, it's not to be defensive, but when the events occurred prior to Enterprise, there was a lot going on across the territory. The town of Fort Smith was under evacuation alert and was evacuated during that time. Betchikol had just recently had a fire burn through and that community was evacuated. Yellowknife was under threat and was later evacuated. We had fires near Toledo, fires near Inuvik, fires across the territory. So there was a lot going on and we were very much stressed as far as our resource availability. So, you know, there was only a small team working on that fire when it first started because that's all that we had available because there was so much going on. As far as what we learned and what we're doing different, I think in the large part, it's the communication that's occurring. So we have daily briefings across with all of our regional duty officers every day. We have daily briefings on every incident management team that's functioning. We're more proactive with assigning incident management teams to fires, even more so than we would in the past. So maybe in the past, some of our fires would have been managed just by the local team. This year, for example, we initiated incident management teams to very much have people dedicated to those fires. So ensuring that the proper lines of communications are happening with the communities so they're aware of the situation and the status of the fire in their community area. And so that territorially, there's communication happening between the duty officers. So again, that there's a lot more communication happening, a lot more information sharing to essentially bolster or enhance that situational awareness. Hope that helps.
Do you have a follow-up, Ollie?
Yeah, I do. I just want to quickly ask the minister as well about the mental health of firefighters, both during and after a season like last year's. The review urges the provision of culturally appropriate expanded mental health services. I'm curious to know if the minister believes that should happen and what actions will be taken to make sure that happens.
Thank you for the question, Ollie. And I'm absolutely. I think that, mental health is certainly a challenge. Like I mentioned earlier, I worked in the fire program for 13 years in my previous life. And, in my role, I traveled all across the NWT, engaged regularly with firefighters, overhead staff, incident management teams. And I think that, in a normal year, it's a very stressful position. I've also, had a couple of brief stints as a duty officer, and I also was a logistics officer. And, there's a lot of pressure in these roles. Daily, and it's prolongs the impact over time. And I think that as the minister, I've had conversations with the department, with the deputy minister, and with many staff about the need for for support around mental health to ensure that our staff are receiving all of the supports that they need in order to continue being effective in this important work.
Thank you. Over to Luke with CBC.
Thank you. So both case studies of the Hay River, Kakiza Enterprise and the Betchko Yellowknife fires called for medium and long-term forecasting as opposed to the 1 to 3 days currently used by the territory. In its response, the government said it maintains the two systems within that 1 to 3 day window, but not beyond. So I'm just wondering why not use longer-term forecasting in the future if it's being called on.
Mike Gravel, are you the person to speak to this?
Yep, thank you, Nick. I can take this one. So we've always had the ability to request or receive long-range forecasts. I think in the past it maybe wasn't as prevalent, but I can assure you, for example, I believe we've had 2 or 3 long-range forecasts this summer already. So again, anticipating there's some fire on the landscape. What are the possibilities with the potential weather events that may change the status of these fires? So it is something that we are implementing this year, and it will be something that we maintain going forward, and we'll continue to stress to our incident commanders and our duty officers that this tool or this service is available.
Luke, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. Thank you. If this can't be answered, I have another question as well, but this is to MNP. I'm just wondering if you feel the territory has committed to do enough or to enough of the recommendations to prevent this situation from happening in the future.
Certainly, I can answer that. First of all, our sense is that we were given full rein to provide independent, objective analysis, set of findings and recommendations to the department. They were received and understood what we were getting at. I did see the response to the recommendation. So my sense is that they're committed to learning from the experience, taking our work and doing what they can to improve. I'd also add that you can't really prevent the situation in terms of wildfire conditions, drought, heat, RH, winds, etc. But you can make enhancements, changes to how you prepare and how you respond to that.
Thank you. Oh, Mike, did you want to pop in on that one?
Yeah, I would, in a similar vein as what Todd finished off with there. The reality is that that any fire agency would have struggled with what existed last year. Something that's been prevalent in the narrative of how wildfire suppression has developed is that we truly can control fire from the bottom up. The reality is that we can't. That fire is a force that is extremely powerful, and in the situation and the conditions that were present, there would have been degrees of struggle, regardless. Weather is extremely powerful and really does drive the fire behavior, and safety always needs to be the number one consideration throughout. So just wanted to be clear about that.
Thank you. I'll go back to Cristiano with Media Ténois. Do you have any more questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. Bob Weber, back to you. Any more questions?
Just one. And I'll throw this open to whoever wants to take a swing at it. What impacts of the fire remain? There were lots of evacuations. There's lots of area burned. What impacts are still out there that are affecting people's lives and livelihoods?
Minister MacDonald?
Yes, thank you for the question. As I been a lifelong Northerner, born and raised here, and certainly as I travel the highways and move around the north, it's certainly I think the long-lasting impact is the impact to the land. A lot of the large treed areas that we used to drive by on a regular basis are no more, and I think that that has an impact right across the NWT. In changes to the habitat for the animals and how it will impact everyone that uses the land, and that's really a huge key resource for us up here.
Bob, did you have a follow-up?
Well, in terms of the community of enterprise, which was, I think, 80% burned over, how are those folks doing in terms of getting their community rebuilt?
Minister, I'll throw that one to you.
Yes, yes, thank you. Yeah. Oh, I apologize for that. Yes, the community of enterprise, and that was such a tragedy that they lost so much, and my heart goes out to that community as they attempt to rebuild. It's certainly been a challenging situation for them. I know I've met with them on an occasion with the Minister of MACA, and he really, the Department of MACA is the lead on that file, and so I don't know that I can provide a lot of detail around what MACA and where things are at between MACA and the community, but I think we're certainly trying to provide any support that we can.
Ollie, back to you. Any more questions?
Nothing further from me right now. Thanks, Nicole.
Okay, thank you. Luke?
Yeah, I got one more. This is a pretty specific part in the report, but I saw the procurement process was highlighted as an issue with some contractors being accused of, quote, exploiting the situation. I'm just wondering if there's going to be any consequences from the territorial government to this behavior, to those contractors that took advantage of the situation.
Minister, did you want to speak to this one?
Certainly. Thank you, Nicole, and thank you for the question, Luke. Yes, I think that, you know, as part of my role in my previous life was I was the manager of forest management services, and I think that, you know, in these types of situations, when we're facing large disasters like we did last year on multiple fronts, certainly very challenging for contractors as well as the GNWT, in that our processes that we have in place certainly can become strained in those types of events. And I think that was fairly clear from the report that, you know, the processes that we had in place around contracting did become strained. But I think that that process moving forward has certainly been high and top of mind, that we needed to look at that differently. And I believe that a lot of work has been done in that area to address things going forward. Of course, in, you know, when we talk of specific contractors or specific instances, I can't really speak to that in a public forum. So thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Luke, do you have a follow-up?
Sure, why not? Got another one. This was asked earlier on, but I'm just wondering for maybe some more details. Like, so a big finding was obviously how short-staffed the NWT was during the 2023 wildfire season. Just like, how are we going to be able to build up local capacity to have the proper staffing if there is another fire season like that? Like, what specific concrete steps are being taken to make sure we have the staffing and the training available?
Go ahead, Minister.
Yes, so I think that, you know, as the department looks over and reviews the NMP report and the recommendations and the responses that we've put forward, obviously we don't have endless budget and the ability to necessarily implement everything that was recommended immediately. But as I said previously, you know, the dialogue continues with my colleagues on cabinet, and the department is looking at prioritizing the recommendations from the report to ensure that, you know, we can increase our capacity to be able to respond to future events. I think that the you know, a big part of this challenge also, you know, we rely heavily on other jurisdictions through a mutual aid agreement that all of the provinces and territories are signatories on across the country. And, you know, in the past, many times as our resources were challenged, we could reach out to other jurisdictions for support. And I think one of the challenges in the 2023 season was that there was so much fire on the landscape that those resources were really depleted across the country. You know, where we were reaching out to our international partners to support our firefighting activities and to ensure that we had those resources available. So I think it's not, you know, as simple as just what the NWT can do to increase its capacity, but also what Canada does as a country to increase their capacity. Thank you.
Looks like Mike has something to add.
Yeah, I would just point to a couple of concrete successes on this front since last year. So, you know, first off, we added additional capacity in terms of long-term rotor wing access during the season. We brought folks on earlier and equipment on earlier. That improved our readiness. Concrete steps taken in a very short period of time based on learnings and and realities that we saw in place last year. I would also point another piece of success in terms of readiness heading through the 2024 season. The work that we did to really catch those overwinter fires good and early. We completed a long scanning mission covering all the priority areas where we expected there to potentially be fire with some potential to have some forward advancement. And we did detect nearly 30 of those and took the appropriate action quickly. So, you know, a couple of important first steps, small wins in the process of constant improvement that we saw, you know, pay some dividends this year. Just wanted to point to that.
Thank you to both of you for that.
Thank you, everyone. It looks like those are all the questions that we have for today. If you do have any follow-up questions, I would invite you to direct them to presssecretary@gov.nt.ca. I will drop that in the chat for everyone. And I just want to say thank you very much for joining us today and have a great afternoon.